them and you.
So let me start the process and then we can have a dialogue. Yeah. All I'm saying is let's not fix this many minutes for this and this, So, okay. So let me start with ancient Sanskrit prayer, since I come from that part of the world. The prayer is from the ancient Upanishads. It's a very beautiful expression of the teaching that we have come from a spiritual infinite source, and that infinite, at least to some extent, is reflected in each one of us. Not as if that is complete and we are left hanging in the air. We are also connected to that. And this is an ancient Upanishadic verse which comes in the beginning of a very important Upanishad. And it says, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamaduchyate Purnasya Purnamataya Purnameva Vasishyate. You must have heard a lot of Purna, yes. So, Purna, the word Purna in Sanskrit means fullness, abundance, fullness, completeness, infiniteness, if there is a word like that, all-pervasiveness, and so on. Purna, in simple words, it means completeness, fullness. So the sloka says, the prayer says, that is complete. Purnam Ata. Ata means that. That here means the source from which this universe, we, you, I, everybody has come from. The source of the entire universe, not only the earth, but also the other planets and so on. The entire universe has come from that completeness, which, for want of a better definition, some people call shunya, especially in the Buddhist texts. And in the Vedantic text, it's called Purna, means fullness. Now, if therefore the source of all of us is that fullness, what we find in our life is that we are not full, we are incomplete. We feel that we are not complete, we are not full, we are empty, so we try to fill ourselves with various things. The whole of the movement of life is trying to fulfill oneself. Fill. Keep filling till you're full. That doesn't apply to food, but everything else. So, the entire life that we lead is an attempt to fill ourselves, because we don't see that we are full. Even if somebody says that source from which we come is full, we say, but I am not, I am empty, at least I am not full, I need to expand, grow, fill myself. This is the whole of life and evolution. When I want to have a family, it also means I feel I continue with the family and become larger. That when I have my progeny, multiplies my genes, and therefore I'm filling myself. If I am poor and I try to become rich, I feel that I'm incomplete because I'm poor and I'm trying to fill myself, fulfill my fullness by trying to become rich or trying to become powerful, and so on and so forth. The whole of life, if you look, is this movement towards fullness. But the next part of the mantra says something different. While it said Purnamada, the source is complete, it also says Purnam Idam, this is also complete. But then that's not our experience. We think we are incomplete. The Upanishad says, but you are also complete. Now this entire spiritual search is to find that completeness in us, which has emerged from that completeness which is the source and which is also in us. The whole spiritual search is to find that completeness in us for which we seek all over the world. The Upanishad says, you are also complete if only you change the direction of your search, and instead of searching for that completeness outside, turn within and search for it. You find that you are no different from that completeness. So this is the definition Purnamida. The rest of the two parts of the sloka means from that completeness you have come, which is this completeness. But remember, you know that you're complete only when you have freed yourself from your limitations. Till then we feel this can't be, I'm not complete. When you've freed yourself from your limitations, when you have dehypnotized yourself from the conditioning that has been imposed upon us from childhood or perhaps even before childhood, and when you see that in essence, not in substance, but in essence, we are a spark of that completeness, and therefore the seed of fulfillment and completeness is already in us, which only needs to be nurtured before it sprouts lovely flowers and fruits. This is the spiritual journey. So even though we have come from that source, the moment we realize this, then we begin to move towards it. This is the whole philosophy and teaching of Vedanta. Now, in India, there was a great weaver saint called Kabir Das. Whichever aspect of or facet of Indian philosophy and mysticism we study, it's difficult to avoid looking at Kabir, because he embodied the essence of the teachings in himself. He led a very simple life, weaving cloth. He was a weaver. And yet he was a very highly spiritually evolved being. And Kabir Das said something very interesting. He said, you know, there is a kind of deer. You know, what's a deer? This thing with antlers. You know? I'm saying this because you think I'm saying my deer. No, the deer. So there is a particular variety of deer in the Himalayas, upper Himalayas, which is called the musk deer. Musk, M-U-S-K. You find it in many perfumes these days. It's in Indian language it's called kasturi, Sanskrit, Hindi, kasturi. So this deer is called the kasturi mriga, the musk deer. And in a certain part of the ear, there's a little pouch under his belly where kasturi is produced, musk is produced. And in that season, when the musk is produced, there's beautiful fragrance in the air. Now, the poor deer, here I mean DEAR, the poor deer, not knowing that the source of the fragrance is coming from under his belly button, goes looking for it everywhere in the forest, poking its snout into thorny bushes, bleeding, not realizing that it's coming from here. Kabir said, now this is the problem with us. We're looking for the fragrance of completeness, satisfaction, happiness, all pervasiveness outside instead of turning and looking at the source which is inside. That about sums up the meaning of Purnamada Purnamidam. That is complete, and the good news is that we are complete too, provided we do not mistake the temporary identities we have adopted and look for the real self, essence of our being. And when you turn and look, you suddenly realize that all that you look for, all that you wanted, everything is here, inside. And figuratively, people said, many great saints, teachers have said, it's the blissful presence that lives in the heart. Once you touch that, then you're free. One of the yogis who came from the East also said, lay treasures in your heart where thieves do not break in and steal. It is this treasure that we seek, and the whole spiritual journey is to find this treasure right in the core of our consciousness. Right. Now, why would one begin to search for it? If one is satisfied with the little trinkets and the little pieces of happiness that we have in the outside world, why would we look for this absolute happiness? This happens when one finds that what one sought is not complete, and that with every little happiness there is also the other side, which is pain. And even when you have a flash of happiness because of something, the very fact that it is so rare that we try to hold on to it. The moment you try to hold on to something, then it means we are beginning to get unhappy. You don't want to let it go. It's so rare that you have such great happiness that when it comes, you're afraid that it would slip away, and so you want to hold on to it. So unhappiness starts again. So it is this search which from ages ago has started and is still going on. And those who turn around and look within have probably found the goal. Others are hoping to find the goal till the illusion that it can be found outside subsides due to various reasons. This is the crux of the matter. So all the spiritual practices which we have been given are basically meant to go within. Anybody who prays, for instance, just close your eyes and pray. Why? Because for some time you blot out the outward influences so that the mind turned inwards. And when the mind turned inwards, it's connected to its source, and the source is the undefinable that. So this is the entire spiritual journey. Now there may be many ways to it, because we come from different backgrounds, different traditions, different conditionings. Therefore, the way towards this may be different, but finally you have to reach the source, whichever way you come. And the mystic or the prophet or the yogi who sees it, his eyes are open. And that opening is called the opening of the wisdom eye. It's not as if you can hit a nail in between your forehead and open the third eye. It's not possible. It's opening of the wisdom of one's being, which is called the opening of the third eye. Somebody said in a veiled language, therefore if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Now, why do different people see it in different ways? The whole problem of people, fighting with each other, saying, my path is the right one, yours is not, or that I have found the truth, you have not, illustrated by a beautiful story which its original source comes in the Jain system of thought. The Jain religion or the Jain, we can't even call it a religion, the Jain system of thought. The origin of the story is from there, but it was popularized by a great Sufi teacher called Jalaluddin Rumi, who found the order of the whirling dervishes. And their order, the dervish, the practitioner, whirls like a top and stops when commanded. It's a special way of looking at it. So Jalaluddin Rumi has written many beautiful poems, descriptions of the spiritual path. And in one of them, he talks about the story of the three blind men who went to see an elephant. Now, three blind men went to see and find out what an elephant is. One of them, because they can't see, touched the trunk of the elephant and said, an elephant, by definition, is something like a rubber hose, it keeps moving, keeps making hissing sounds, and we have been warned that if you go too close, it can wind around you and drop you onto the ground. Definition of an elephant. The other blind man, who was probably touching the feet, said an elephant is like a big pillar, because rough on the outside, and once in a while keeps moving, and it's huge. And again we have been warned that if you go too close, it might land on you, and that's the end of your life. The third blind man was holding the tail, touching the tail of the elephant, and he said, an elephant is, like a broom. Or those days there were no bathroom brushes, but I feel like a broom, and it keeps moving all the time, and the bristles are so sharp that you might get hurt if you go too close. Well, this is the definition of an elephant. So very soon there was a big fight, almost fisticuffs, between the three blind men, deciding who is right. What is the right definition of an elephant? This guy said, no, it can't be because this is what I know. This guy said, no, can't be because this is what I know. So at this time that a man appeared who was not blind, like us. I hope we are not blind. Sometimes one wonders, the eyes are open, but we might be blind in a different way. Let's forget that. So somebody came who was not blind, like these three, and he found this fight going on, and he said, "What's going on? Why are you fighting?" He said, "No, no, no, the elephant is like this." The other guy said, "Oh, shut up, the elephant is like this." The third guy said, "No, no, not possible, this is what an elephant is." So the man who could see said, mystic, said, "Well, can you stop fighting, because I need to talk to you for a few minutes." Okay. So he said, "You're right." He said to one of them, "You're right, you're right, you're right." They said, "This can't be. This is nonsense. You're saying all of us are right," but he said, "Just a minute. You're right, you're right, you're right. But all of you are wrong. 3 of you are wrong. Because you've seen just a small part of it. I have my eyes, I've seen the whole elephant. So while you may be right in your own way, you're wrong because the other guy sees the other part and thinks this is right. But when I see the whole elephant, I don't know why you fight, because elephant is what you say, okay, but much more than that. Therefore, the infinite reality, of which fortunately we also have a small spark in us, is also part of us, is so infinite that you can look at it in so many ways and see the same reality out there. There was a great saint called Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, India. He was the guru of Swami Vivekananda, the well-known Swami Vivekananda. From his childhood, he started practicing various spiritual disciplines. He started by worshipping the mother goddess, Kali. He went on to learn Tantra. Then he went on to learn Advaita Vedanta. And then after that, he spent many months practicing the discipline of mystical Christianity and then of the Sufis and so on. And in the end, he said, "I have practiced all the paths and I have found the goal through all paths. Therefore, whatever path is yours, put your attention on it. Don't blame the other." So, this, in substance, is the understanding that we need to develop. If you see this, once Swami Vivekananda, in the course of his talk, said, "I'm a socialist." So everybody was shocked because they thought this is an ochre-robed monk. He cannot be a socialist. They said, "Why?" Because he said, "Well, half a loaf is better than none," one side. And then he said, "But my brand of socialism is different." So they said, "What is your brand?" He said, "From my experience and understanding, every human being is a spark of the divine. There's a big fire called the divine. Every human being is a spark. And therefore, in every heart, in the recesses of our consciousness, there is an essence of the human being, of the Supreme Being. If that is so, all are equal. We call it Vedantic socialism. When he said this, all other socialism has failed in many places. Economic socialism has failed. But this, what he called Vedantic socialism, is something in which you recognize the divine spark in all human beings. If I say no, then I deny the all-pervasiveness of the Supreme Being. Well, this is an important teaching, so we need to, if you see somebody trying to persuade us from not understanding this, it's our duty to defend it, no question. But keep in mind that while you try to reform or change, don't harbor hatred in your heart. Because if every human being is an expression of the divine, who are you going to hate? It's like hating yourself. So this is the teaching. I think now I will stop. I said I'll just give a little bit of fuel, put a little fuel into the fire, and then wait for the crackling of the questions that come.
Thank you, sir. So the first question is coming from someone who's a longtime member of this congregation, which is called Chokhmat Haleb, which means wisdom of the heart.
Wisdom of the heart. Okay, I was reading it outside.
Yeah.
Hakmat or Chokhmat?
Chokhmat. Yeah. And when he was actually married in this space decades ago, when the founder was here, and the person who's asking this question was married here in this space. And so the question is whether you can talk about the overlap and difference between the chakra system and the tree of life in the Kabbalistic system, which seems to be very similar.
Yeah, we can discuss it, but I think it's kind of, shall I say, a little bit too esoteric to go into, but okay. All right. So, yeah, in the ancient teachings of the Jewish tradition, there is the tree of life with the Kether or the crown on the top, and Vina and Chokhmah on either sides. And there are also 3 pillars with the center pillar up and 2 pillars on either side with different sections marked with different names in Hebrew. And the Kabbalah makes a good study of it. And if you need to go into details, I would suggest that there is a beautiful exposition of these in a book called the Zohar, which is nicely commented upon and written by Rabbi Simon ben Yochai, maybe 100 years, 50 years ago, probably 50, 60 years ago. So there you find that there are many similarities between the two, but I wouldn't say exactly this. You see, there is something we need to understand, which we generally don't look into, because when we practice yoga, the meditation which is within ourselves, we are only concerned with our own centers of consciousness, called the chakras. Among the Sufis, they are called mukhams, stations. So we think of these centers. The centers are there. I'm not saying they're not there, but we conceive them as the centers of consciousness from the gross to the subtle, centered in the spine, which is the Shushumna, spinal cord. And then we are concerned generally only about this. What we miss generally is that Now let's take the lowest center called the Muladhara. Now this is supposed to be at the end of the spine, the bottom. The Muladhara, now each of these centers is also represented by Tattva. Now when you say Tattva, principle. Tattva is actually a word taken from Sankhya, though it has been used in many other thoughts and philosophies. Now, the Muladhara Tattva is Prithvi. When you say Prithvi, it means the earth. It means also solid. The gross, solid, objective world that we live in is represented by the Muladhara, the lowest center. The idea is to shift your awareness from that to subtler and subtler levels till it reaches the highest, the crown, the Keter, and then you realize your relationship with the divine. Completely. Here it's less, more, and then complete. What we don't generally realize is that each of these centers, while it is reflected in the human body, so the Pythagoreans, founded by the Pythagoras Society, founded by the great geometrician Pythagoras, call this human organism the microcosm. The cosmos in micro form, in a small way. And the outside world, the cosmos, as the macrocosm. Now, usually what we miss when we do this meditation and look at this center is that each of these centers with their tattvas, principles, like earth, as I said in the Buddha, is also linked to the macrocosm. So that when you master this, you have mastered that. As above, so below is the principle. So whatever is there in the cosmos, in a small way, in a miniature way, is in the human beings' psychic channels. So when you relate to your psychic centers, which are called chakras, you are also relating to the macrocosmic chakras, which is the earth around us, earth on which we live and the earth that is around us, the whole of this objective existence. As you go higher, now the Swadhisthana is represented by a crescent moon. And there you come to the next tattva, which is called apas, liquid tattva. This is also connected to all the liquid forms on this earth also, not only here. So there is always this correlation and integration of the inner and the outer. This is also the teaching of the Zohar and of the Kabbalah, which is as there in the macrocosm, everything is also there in us in the microcosm. And as we master the microcosm, we establish our relationship with the macrocosm. This is the link, the relationship. Words used may be different. Today morning I was talking to you there, and I said this beautiful sound that Moses heard in the mountains when he went up to see the fire burning behind the bush was Aye Asher Aye, which means I am that I am. And that, as I explained to you in Sanskrit, is Tat, the Supreme. There are no words to describe it. Therefore it's called the Supreme. It's called that. So this interrelationship is there, which requires a lot of deep study into other traditions to figure out how it's linked. A surface study won't do. One has to go deep. Unfortunately, today it's hard to find people who have dwelled deep into the metaphysics, the mysticism, and the understanding of these things. Unfortunately find it very hard. You find only the outer. It's very difficult to go and look for someone who knows the inner. You probably know or you don't know, but in Kerala, where I was born, where I come from, in this coastal town called Cochin, there is an old synagogue of the Jews who came, I think, 100 years ago and settled down, and the king of Cochin gave them the land to stay, and they built a synagogue there. It's worth seeing, at least as a curiosity, because the tiles which are laid are all Chinese porcelain tiles, which were imported at that time. When I was just out of college, and even after that, I used to go there because I was curious to learn about this religion. What is the synagogue? What do they do there? And there was one man, his name was David. He was a Kohen. The Kohens are those who deal with the religious aspects of the Jewish religion. And we became good friends. Well, he could speak Malayalam like a normal, born and brought up. We used to go have a cup of tea, sit down somewhere, simple man, and talk. And one day I just kind of asked him, what is this about this Kabbalah? Do you know anything? He looked at me and he said, no, I don't know anything. I said, the way he said it, I thought he was trying to deny it deliberately. So I said, Mr. David, there must be something. No, I don't know anything about it. It's all dangerous thing, don't touch it. I kept persisting. And then he gave me a few beautiful hints about this sacred knowledge they have. And I came off, and then I went off to the Himalayas at the age of 19. And then I came back after many years. Then I went here and there, and finally when I went back to the synagogue, there was not a single family left there. This man had also gone. And there was no one there. There were some houses around. They had all gone to Israel, and some of them used to come for a visit. So I went to one family who gave me a cup of tea, and we had a nice chat. I asked, where is this Kohen? They said, he's dead, he's gone, and there's nobody to replace him. The synagogue is like that. So, even if there is some such knowledge, and even if there are teachers left, I'm sure there are. I have a good friend who lives in New York, who is a very, what do you call those Orthodox? Hasidic? Yes. They gather in a big family. Every time I finish my tour in the US, I go spend 2 quiet days with them. We meet, we discuss various things. They are quite orthodox, but they understand. And when somebody is interested in knowledge, that's all that matters. So this should be the attitude.
So your teacher, Maheshwara Babaji, on the surface was a not yogi, but in many ways he embodied almost Ramakrishna's path, where he understood all of these things and could impart knowledge to you about all of these things. So this next question is if you can share anything about how Maheshwara Babaji became Maheshwara Babaji.
If only I knew. But I can only say that he was an extraordinary being, a person. I've not seen anybody like that in my life. I've heard about other people, but I've not seen anybody like that. So he was an extraordinary person, but I don't know how he became like that. If you ask me, I'm stunned. I'm stumped. I can't answer this question. But what I found, you're right. He came from the Nath Sampradaya. Now the Nath Sampradaya also has now got kind of very narrowly recognized as a cult or a sect. It's not. A Nath Supreme, when you say Nath, it means the Supreme Being, Nath, the Lord. And anyone who is related to that and who has learned how to commune with this spirit called the Lord, the Nath, automatically becomes a Nath. The outward symbols don't matter. At one time they used to wear outward symbols. They used to wear rings here. They were called kan patas because they punctured the ears and wore rings. But all that is not important. Since I have lived with the Nath, Maheshwara Babaji, he told me not to wear any of the paraphernalia of a Nath. I wore it for some time. He said, when you go back, take everything off. Your job is different. And they are married and unmarried Naths, both. And the teaching of the Narada Sampradaya is that there is a Supreme Being, and every soul, every individual soul has a spark of that Supreme Being, and how to learn how to contact and be in touch with that spark and see that you are part of the divine. I mean, this is basically all that Nath Sampradaya is about. And the Naths greet each other, they say, Alak Niranjan. That means unwritten, that which cannot be expressed through words, Alak. And Niranjan, the stainless, which can never be stained. That's our inner being. And then the reply is usually Adesh, so be it, as you say. This is the Nath greeting. So, I don't know how he became like that, but I can tell you this. I learned much of the ancient Indian texts from Maheshwarnath Babaji. And he did not carry a single text or scripture or a book with him. He did not carry anything with him. Everything came from his mind. It was not learned or by hearted. So which means I think he touched the source of a supreme intelligence by which he could teach what he wanted to teach at any given time. Partly, I think he passed on a little bit of that. I wouldn't say the whole, a little bit of that. Which is why I survived. I can only say that it's difficult to define. But may I also add, when there is a magnet, very powerful magnet, when if you're an iron piece, if you take it close to the magnet, it acquires some of the magnetic qualities of the magnet. But when you take it far away, the magnetism goes. You move closer, the magnetism comes back. Until this little iron piece becomes a magnet in its own turn, permanent. Otherwise it's temporary. So the beginning is temporary, and gradually, step by step, it becomes a permanent magnet. So therefore, this iron piece also sat near that Maheshwarnath magnet, which also starts with M, magnet, and somewhat magnetized a little bit.
This next question relates to that concept as well. We talked about kind of more advanced and less advanced beings. And when we do that, aren't we just replicating this acquisition mindset in search of liberation? And isn't the point to ultimately drop the search and drop the sense of comparison?
Say that again.
Isn't the point to drop the search, and that's how the question is written, and drop comparison?
I think so, yeah. First of all, who are we who have no understanding of this to say somebody is higher and somebody is lower? What is the criteria? How do I figure out? You can't. In fact, a spiritual teacher can only be understood by a spiritual teacher. So if you are not, then it's better not to form any judgment. When this matter, somebody is high and somebody is low, and things like that. Keep out of all that. In spiritual practice, you don't need to compare. You just need to see how you can reach the goal. When you reach the goal, then probably you can figure out. But then you don't say anything, you're silent. You see, the whole of this is to, having found the spark of the divine in us, to see that spark in others, no matter what they think about it. you see the spark. That's enough, more than enough. You don't then make someone high or low. Everybody is a spark of the divine. Comparison completely ceases, so there is no need to compare. So I think instead of wasting time and saying, oh, he is a great teacher, he is not a great teacher, he is a small fellow, he is a big fellow, why don't we do our practices and figure out for ourselves what is the meaning of high and what is the meaning of low? I would say low is when we have not touched it. You touched it, you are high. Literally high, okay? It takes some time to adjust our behavior so that you don't appear high to others. There are some who don't care, but when you have to go out into the public, you need to reform yourself a bit. Maheshwarnath Babaji was not reformed at all. If he wanted to call me an idiot, he called me an idiot. No offense. But when he was kind, he was kind. But for me, I can't do that, you know. I go down to the road, carry on with my life.
He also would show up in rather unexpected places, like you described him once walking out of a limousine in Bombay, arranged for a fancy hotel. It seems like he crosses all of these barriers and fits in wherever he needs to.
For a person who has touched the highest or the deepest, there are no boundaries. It's not only the case of Maheshwarnath Babaji. I can give you the case of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, for instance. Now, in those days there was a great dramatist and also a producer of plays, the famous Star Theatre in Calcutta, whose name was Girish Chandra Ghosh. Now, Girish Chandra Ghosh, because of the profession which he was in, had always some relationship with women, which are normally not considered legitimate. And he was a drunk. When I say drunk, not somebody who had a drink sometime, no. He used to be drunk and used to produce and write his plays. But he was very fond of Ramakrishna. And we don't know what connection there was. He was very fond of Ramakrishna. And there are times when midnight he used to walk into Dakshineshwar and wake him up. And all the people who were around Ramakrishna said, why are you allowing this guy to come? He's like, he's a drunk, he's this, he's that. So why you are loving him? Not only that, when he comes, you sit down and sit him on your lap and talk to him. What is this? We are good people and here is a man who was... So Ramakrishna used to tell them, look, the relationship between Girish and me is my business, not yours. Why? Because he could not think of anybody as degraded or less than anybody else. Why? Because he saw only the divine spark. And he knew that this guy has a potential, even though outside he's like this. So he loved him, and he loved him when he finished off all his habits. So he used to tell him to sit down and meditate or chant a mantra. Girish came to him one day and said, in the night, I can't do any of these things. He said, I cannot chant, I cannot meditate, it's impossible for me to do any of these things, but don't withdraw your grace from me. This is how I am. And now that requires a great deal of honesty to say that. Normally people pretend. Girish also had one quality, he could not pretend. So Ramakrishna said, but how is this possible? You're not... He said, can you take my power of attorney? I give it to you. Take my power of attorney, because I don't think I can do anything. Not even chant. Ramakrishna said, think twice. What you said just now, think carefully. Are you serious? He said, I'm very serious. He said, okay, I'm taking your power of attorney. So Girish went back. He was very tired. He went to his house. He opened the bottle. He had reached a stage when he didn't need a glass. He opened the bottle and then he saw Ramakrishna standing in the bottle with his lovely smile. He put it down. Then he wandered into the streets to the red light district. Wherever he saw those ladies there, he saw Ramakrishna. He came back to him and said, I think I'm going mad. Please take back this. I don't want to give you my power of attorney. He said, once given is given, now go home. So later, Girish Chandra Ghosh became a great yogi, a saint. When Swami Vivekananda came from the West after traveling and meeting many people who were indulgent in various factors and who said, we want to practice but we can't change. He brought two of them and said, I'm going to show you an example of someone who is worse than all of you and who is now respected by everybody. So he brought them and introduced them to Girish. He said, this is the man. So, why I said this is a person who has touched that and who sees the spark in everyone. No one is bad and no one is good and no measuring, and you can't do that. Well, if somebody is not on the right path, it's your duty to correct the person, but not hate. You can still change. I think affection and love can change things better than hatred or anger. Yeah.
So this question is a very simple and basic one. It says, what does it mean to turn your senses inward? And how does one start to turn their senses inward?
Whoever has asked this question must have learned or read that there is the process of inward contemplation where you have to turn your senses within. Otherwise this question wouldn't arise. All it means is the fundamental need for anyone who wants to ascend spiritually is a quiet mind, a tranquil mind. And if you are all the time indulging in sensory temptations and sensory experiences, it is difficult for the mind to become calm and quiet and tranquil. Because senses by their very nature pull you in different directions. Not right or wrong, it's a fact, they do. So one needs to therefore disengage the senses from its outward engagements, the objects of the senses. And therefore the meaning of that is to turn it inward. Now, no human being's mind, nobody's mind, can naturally remain in a state of vacuum, of not enjoying anything. This is not possible. Because if you just sit quiet for some time, you still crave to enjoy something. Because the mind by its very nature craves enjoyment. We are saying that if you can enjoy, but at the same time, without allowing the senses to engage with the outside objective world, then you are able to turn your senses with it. There is the two words used in the Upanishad. One is called the pravritti marga, and the other is called the nivritti marga. Pravritti is action to allow your senses, which is okay, normal. But then when you realize that the tranquility and the peace and the happiness you seek are perhaps available inside when the mind is quiet and tranquil, then you withdraw that and turn the senses inward. Why do I say turn the senses inward? Because then you learn to enjoy something inside, within. When you learn to enjoy something inside your heart, and when that enjoyment becomes more and more, then your internal senses are now engaged with enjoying that. So they are withdrawn from the outer. You can't leave them in the limbo. They want something. And if they don't find anything outside, they would again go back outside because there is nothing inside. So if you turn and learn how to bring about happiness within, which already exists in us, we don't see it because the mind is always agitated. So if you can calm the mind and turn inward, this is the meaning of turning the senses within. And it comes only through practice, because all our lives we have been enjoying only externally. One day you cannot suddenly turn it and say, let me go with it. Not possible. So it requires a lot of training, a lot of discipline. But once you have done it, you are free. You are no more dependent on the outside world for your tranquility and your happiness. In the midst of all circumstances, the Gita's words are sarvatra samabuddhaya. Under all circumstances, the mind remains tranquil. Does it happen one day like magic? No. It requires training, because all the time the mind is flowing outward. It's not a joke. You need to pull it back. It takes time, it takes effort. I might also add that if you spend some time with someone for whom this has happened, then it's possible that it will be easier to do it. I tried very hard, but then with Maheshwarnath Babaji by my side, it was effortless. But when he was not there, it was not. Then gradually, and he kept saying, all the training is to stand on your own feet. Don't depend on me. So I trained, I worked hard. But the first time I really experienced that was in close proximity with this man. He was just sitting under a tree near the Ganga, and I saw him and he was so quiet and still and peaceful. And I said, what is it? He has nothing. So what about me? Why can't I? And then slowly it occurred to me that it's quietness and stillness that matters, nothing else matters. And then started working towards it. Even if it happens to you spontaneously, it will go off. You need to keep working on it to get it back.
So we do have more questions. We're at the 1 hour mark, but for anyone who hasn't yet submitted a question and would like to, please write it down and raise your card, and someone will be by to pick it up. Before I go on, I just want to say that there are a lot of questions that came in that are very personal, and in some ways those are not the kind of questions that are appropriate to ask when we're taking everyone's time, both who are in this room and then the many people who will be are watching live and then will watch later. So I won't be asking.
How much more time do we have?
We have as much time as you're comfortable with. So this next question is, many people have a form of this question, so I'm paraphrasing several, but essentially this person has an illness or some kind of a discomfort in their body, and yet they also have a practice that they've been engaged with, and they want to know if it's effective, even when, if the practice is effective, even though the body may not be sound and the mind may be a little agitated still. practices still have a beneficial effect when our body is not sound?
I think one of the reasons why the yogic way of sadhana is important is that it also starts with taking care of the body. After yama niyamas, the next is about the body, asanas, and then pranayama and so on. So while it is necessary to have a sound body as much as possible when you do the practice, sometimes you start a practice you are not ready for yet. I don't know why or who teaches that, but anyway. And then you find that the body is not able to stand it. There are some reactions happening. Then it's better to withdraw for a while from the practice and continue when you're again back to normal. Depends on what. However, I would advise that if you have any kind of physical ailment or nervous weakness which prevents you from practicing meditation, avoid it for a while till you get better and try to do things which will put your body back to shape and then start the sadhana again. That's my advice. And if you have learned the practice from someone and which has caused this problem, go back to that source and ask that person why this is happening. Because we don't know what practice has been given. I usually get that questions. We went somewhere and somebody gave us something and now I said, can you go back to the source from where you got and ask this question?
So this question is sort of geared or coming from kind of a beginning practitioner. And the summary of the question is, what should they really expect on the journey of self-discovery?
What should I?
What should they expect on the journey of self-discovery?
No. At the moment, if it's a beginner who has asked this question, I don't know, if it's a beginner, then have no expectations except that you're going to go to a higher level of spiritual understanding. Because if you have some kind of expectations which you don't know but have been worked and cooked up in your brain, that will act as a great barrier towards moving forward. So leave that out first. Don't imagine anything. Just allow it to happen. And the second is, as you practice, you will begin to know where you are going. So, my suggestion is, don't have any expectations which are projected by your mind, but continue to practice till you yourself begin to experience these things. Don't build up images and try to reach that image. That image then becomes a barrier towards going forward. So, and be humble and say that, look, I'm not such a great being, I'm practicing and one day I might touch it. That humility is essential to move forward. Otherwise, even small signs may be exaggerated. One day one might be very tranquil and think that one has attained the truth. Next day it won't be there, that tranquility. So until you reach there, it's better to be a little critical about oneself and move carefully. Plus, one day if you feel tranquil, don't immediately set up shop and start teaching others, for God's sake. You have lost yourself.
Okay, so we're in the West where, Ashtanga Yoga, the Eightfold Path, mostly has a...
What's that?
Ashtanga.
Ashtanga Yoga, yes.
It only has one anga, which is asana, and the rest are phantom limbs here. But But this question is a very relevant one. It says, what's the relation between sex and spirituality? Is it necessary to be celibate because of the power of sexual energy?
Is that the same question?
It's one question. Yeah.
So what's the first question?
What's the relation between sex and spirituality?
No, but you said something about Ashtangas.
Yeah, that was my commentary.
Okay, now let's get this straight. All great yogis need not necessarily be lifelong celibates. Let's start there. However, you will find that and there are a number of yogis who are also celibate, lifelong. Please, I want to make the distinction between lifelong and partial. I would say that as you advance on this path, you are actually diverting your attention from the gross engagement of the senses to something subtler. So a certain amount of sexual control is necessary. That doesn't mean it should be a lifelong celibacy. Also, it is dangerous to suddenly declare that you are going to be a lifelong celibate, because that will create many psychological problems in one if one is not a great yogi. So my suggestion is start with a disciplined approach to sexual indulgences, which means not the senses run away with your mind, let your mind dictate what your senses are going to do. So, what I was trying to say is, for a beginner at least, set apart some days. Now this will be not too difficult if your partner also thinks along the same lines, otherwise it's going to be a problem. But suppose two of you understand this and are cooperating on this, first start with saying that so many days I am not going to indulge myself. Not that it is bad. There's nothing good or bad out here. It's only that you are sublimating your energies and you require as much energy as possible to sublimate. You will understand this if I go a little into, for instance, when trying to avoid the word because it's so bandied about, Kundalini Yoga. Now, you see what happens, why all this comes about, all these questions, because there is an intimate link between your sexual instincts and your meditative practices, which is why all this celibacy and all these things come into play. As you know probably, and as I said, the lowest center in which most of our energies are usually concentrated is the Muladhara. And the Muladhara lies just at the root of your sexual organs, at the bottom. Of course in the spine, but also stretches on there. And for a human being, after food and shelter, the greatest enjoyment is sex. We don't know anything more. I'm also hoping I'm also a human being, so we. And when one enjoys sexually, it's the same energy in the Muladhara that is responsible for it. It flows outwardly. When it flows outwardly, you have sexual enjoyment. And it is something that everybody seeks somehow. It's the biggest thing. If it's not there, you know how many people are worried that they need to go to a doctor because it's not happening and so on. It's a big thing. Now we are saying, if Muladhara is the center from which it happens, this great enjoyment takes place. The same energy that flows outward from Muladhara can be turned in the reverse direction and made to move up to Sushumna, which is the spine, the Sushumna Nadi. And then your mind opens into greater dimensions. Not only that, since it's the same energy, the enjoyment that one gets in sex is replicated also in the human system, but not in the reproductive organs, but in other centers of the spine. Now that needs at least short periods of non-indulgence in the physical activity, some kind of a discipline, so that this energy is totally concentrated on moving upwards. As it moves upwards, the yogi who has practiced it knows that when this energy moves to different centers and when it comes here, the ecstasy that is felt, which the Adi Shankara celebrated as the Sundari Lahari, the ecstasy of beauty, is so great that no sexual activity on earth has that much enjoyment. But it doesn't happen in the sexual organs, it happens somewhere else. Everything bursts forth in like a fountain up here. And so therefore they said, if you always stay at the lower level, or just keep indulging, then you may not be able to lift it to higher level. That's all there is to it. It doesn't mean that one has to be a monk all one's life, or a celibate, sorry, not a monk, a celibate all one's life to reach there. It doesn't mean that at all. But it means a certain discipline is required to control your energies. That's what it means. Now this applies not only to sex, but also other aspects of life. Brahmacharya, the word used in Sanskrit, means charya, meaning action, activity, which is meant to take you to the Brahman, the supreme truth. It is not only this, there are other things also included in it, like proper diet, proper exercise, the whole thing together is brahmacharya, not just this part. And also if you get obsessed with this all the time, then it increases more than becomes less. So we need to give it its right place and move forward.
If the goal is to reach the source, and we all come from the source, why are we separated from the source?
Okay. So this is something which is I keep encountering this question. Why did it happen? Well, can you admit that it has happened? And that we probably aren't equipped to know why? It's just like saying, why is there gravity? Well, gravity is there and you have to deal with it, right? Yeah or no? Yes. So, this has happened. It's difficult often to find out where this has happened and why. But the fact that it is there and we need to counter it, we need to get free of it. Perhaps when you are free of it, you would be able to discover why. I told you the story today, the Buddha and the arrow. You heard that today. Some people weren't there. So somebody went into an orchard and he got shot by a hunter, accidentally. And the arrow went in here and he fell down. So the Buddha asked the question, now what is it that the person should be doing? Remove the arrow and free himself from the pain first, or lie there with the arrow on and try to figure out who sent the arrow, who was the hunter who did it, why did it happen, because by the time he might get tetanus and die. He didn't say tetanus, I'm saying. So, the first thing is to get it free. When it's out, then you probably may be able to figure out and trace why. And some who have traced the why have not been able to explain it to others because it's beyond the ordinary mind. This is why. It's like a small baby asking the parents, oh, mommy, you love me so much, don't you? Yeah, we love you. We love you more than anything else. Then why didn't you invite me for your wedding? There's no answer. right? So sometimes we are not equipped to understand the why. So equip ourselves first. But the fact is that we are separated and we need to go back to the source.
What's the difference between one-pointed attention and watching the mind?
One-pointed attention, the word used is dharana in the Yoga Sutras, is to give complete attention to something without any distraction, with no distraction whatsoever. Now it's difficult because all the time the mind is accustomed to distractions. You're thinking of one thing now and thinking of another thing in the next second and so on. It goes on running around. So to bring it together in one pointed attention is not easy. It requires a great deal of practice unless one is so interested in what one is doing that this one-pointed attention becomes natural. That's also there. Suppose I do my meditation thinking, oh, I have to meditate today. One-pointed attention is difficult to get. But if I say that the most important thing in my life, it's a life and death question. Or like listening to music, I am so interested in it. Then there is not even effort to bring about one-pointed attention. It happens by itself. What was the second part of it? I got one-pointed, yes.
Watching the mind.
Yeah, okay. So, is that the same as watching the mind? That was the question, right? Now, I would say it's not exactly the same, but you cannot watch your mind without one-pointed attention. If you don't have one-pointed attention, you cannot watch your mind. Because you'll be always distracted and the mind is also distracted. Distraction is part of the mind, so the watcher himself is distracted and therefore one-pointedness cannot happen. So you need to develop the habit of attending completely to watching the mind. Then it becomes one-pointed attention to watch the mind. They're not the same, but you need one-pointed attention to watch the mind. Watch the mind is essential. In fact, the vipassana basically is to watch, to observe, not to indulge. Right?
How important is having a guru to ascend spiritually?
I think you shouldn't have any gurus. I mean, I'm joking. What I'm trying to say is that it's very difficult to figure out a guru. So if you fall into the wrong hands, then you suffer. I mean, you don't, in fact, instead of moving forward, you move backwards. Right? So, if you ask me, if I'm looking for a, I'm not, all done, I'm looking for a guru. I would look for someone who gives me reasons for what he wants me to do, who makes me understand the teachings and not keeps me engaged in worshipping him all the time, and who keeps my mind free to think and act and meditate, and who leads me in the right direction. I give you an example. Suppose I know the way to go from here to San Jose. I don't know actually. Suppose I do. Now this is very difficult to say, I don't know. Unfortunately nowadays everybody knows. There's no one who would say I don't know. So anyway, it doesn't matter. So I don't know what. I don't know how to go from here to San Jose. Now I'm standing at the door, but suppose I know. And you come to me and you say, look, I have to go to San Jose. How do I go? Nowadays it's very easy. You say, put it on Google and go. But I'm talking about the pre-Google days, let's say. I'm standing there. And I know where San Jose is. Okay. So I direct him. Go on this street, then turn on that street. Now, if this guy has to reach San Jose, what has he got to do? Go, drive? Or is it enough if he stands there and does arati to me? You are the greatest teacher. You have shown me how to go to San Jose. Will he reach San Jose? So what I mean to say is that while it's important to have a guide, it's important also to practice what has been said. The teaching is more important than the teacher. Please understand this. And if a teacher says, I am more important than the teaching, I would run miles away.
Can you describe the experience of touching, quote, I am that? How does it change you, and does it stay forever?
I don't know how to answer this question. You know, several great people, not me, several great people have touched that and become totally silent because they don't know what to say. So whatever you say, it may not be the right thing because, well, one thing is clear. Your mind then remains tranquil in the midst of all circumstances. One. Second, there is a breezy joy in you which does not change, whatever be the outward circumstances. You also discover that what you have been doing till you touch that has been kind of waste of time. It was useless. And I might add that you pray and hope that everybody has that experience. Because it's such a wonderful thing that is missed by people. So you feel bad that people don't, some people, I'm sure some people do have this, don't understand and experience this. There's always this feeling of, I won't call it pain, but regret that why can't somebody find out it's right before you? That feeling. Above all, it's an all-pervasiveness and a lightness to your mind which is indefinable. And it's there under all circumstances and at all times. You don't have to try to bring it about. It's done.
We're getting a little low on our time, so I'm paraphrasing a few questions which all boil down to what are some simple tips and guidance you can give for people who are having trouble stilling their mind or meditating or encountering a lot of anxiety and fear?
Shall we keep this as the last question?
Sure.
6 o'clock. While my mind is still tranquil. I need to go also. So, okay. Yeah, are there any simple tips by which you can keep your mind quiet or go deep into meditation? There are simple tips. One is that the state that you desire or what you want, what you're looking for, should be steadily kept in your mind and don't allow anything else to creep into this. This is very important. This is the basis. Not that I'm interested one day and then the next day I'm not, no. You should have that one pointed desire that this is the most important thing in my life and I should find it. You should start from there. If you're asking for a practical technique, I would say that set apart a certain time during the day when you will only meditate or engage in the activity that will take you to this. Don't give that time away for anything else. Keep that sacrosanct. Don't let it change. This if you do daily, then it's possible that it's the best thing that one can do. And whatever be the practice, it doesn't matter what practice. It can be simply watching your breath, or we have something called hum sa. Watch the breath, very simple. Watch the breath, and as you breathe in, you chant mentally the sound hum. And when you breathe out, you mentally chant the sound so. So it becomes hum, so, as you breathe in and breathe out. Well, different schools have different words in this practice, different mantras. This is very simple, hum, so. Keep doing that as you watch your breath. This is a very simple practice. But please remember that keep a time fixed for this and don't change it. Don't do anything else during this period of time. Do only this. If you can do that, then I think slowly one can move. Or mantra japa. One simple way of doing it. Take up a mantra. Better you ask somebody who has done before and consult and take a mantra which suits you. Suppose in my mind I am very fond of the deity called, say, Krishna. And then I start doing the Om Namah Shivaya. It won't work. So figure out what is your best, what you like, and then take a mantra accordingly. And just keep chanting, very simple. Don't think why you're chanting. Don't worry about your breath, nothing, just keep chanting. Fix your entire attention. Then people say, well, it becomes meaningless. It's precisely because it is meaningless that it becomes effective. If it had some meaning which you know, then your mind would be speculating on that. Suppose it's pure sound coming in and going out. You're not thinking of what it means. It's just the sound. Then it becomes one-pointed. These are some of the simple things that you can do. Well, you can also go out, and if you have a backyard, and sit under a tree and just listen to the birds. This is also meditation. These are some of the simple things you can do.
So we're at the 6 o'clock hour, and I know there were many other questions. Some of you were asking about how to get the Kriya initiation, and I was trying to invite Naresh to talk a little bit about Satsang Foundation, if he's willing, but as far as I understand...
Naresh is going to teach Kriya.
As far as I know, the Kriya initiation is only happening at the retreat in Texas, Sacred Grove, which is Sriam's center in the US, and the retreats are all full. But Naresh, if you want to say a few words.
I don't think I can move that.
Yes, you can. Pull it down.
Okay, so question was Kriya initiation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So many of you may know, but in case you don't know, Sriam founded the Satsang Foundation way back in 1998 in India, and there have been several initiatives that have been going on under the Satsang Foundation banner there since 98. Includes education, free schooling for children in Madanapalli. He has set up a People Grow School, which is a residential school. He's most recently started construction of a hospital with 100 beds to provide quality health care in Madanapalli. That project is currently ongoing. In 2017, he started the Blossom Foundation here in the US. We have a property in Grant, Texas. We bought that in 2018, and in 2019, which was the last time we came here before COVID happened, we were able to hold the inaugural set of retreats there. So we are in the process of building up the center, and we aim to have a fully contained facility that includes a meditation hall, accommodation for about 100 to 120 people on property. And we also have a shrine for Sri Guru Babaji, which is already in place and open. So on Kriya initiation, it typically only happens at retreats. That's how Sir has been doing it. Before we founded Blossom Foundation and had this property that we have in Grand, we used to hold retreats, one in the West Coast and one in the East Coast, and those were the instances that you could get Kriya initiation from Sir. This year was an exception because he hasn't come for 2.5 years. He did a one-day workshop in Pasadena. That was last Saturday. We have 5 sets of retreats that are going to start this Friday and go through the 5th of June. We were pretty much booked within about 4.5 hours of opening up the retreats. So to answer the question, Kriya initiation done by Sir only happens only at retreats. But Sir will be back in the US again, and he will tell us when he's going to be back, and we will hold more retreats, and that will be the next opportunity that anyone who's interested in Kriya that has not been able to get a seat at one of the current retreats, that will be your opportunity. So.
If I may add, you don't have to take Kriya to advance spiritually. Seriously. Kriya is merely a practice. We need you need to be first of all seriously interested in spiritual practice, and Kriya is just one of those practices. And when I say Kriya, I talk about a particular tradition of Kriya. There may be other traditions, there may be other Kriyas, no problem. But I have not yet found someone whom I can depute and say, give Kriya. This is the problem. I haven't found. I hope I find somebody. But till then you'll have to, if those who are interested in Kriya will have to put up with these difficulties. Because I personally take responsibility if I give Kriya. And I therefore don't want to depute it to somebody who cannot do that. So, maybe this time we can't give Kriya at the moment because many people have registered and they will probably practice Kriya. But I also know many people who have taken Kriya from me many years ago and have not practiced for more than an hour. Or do it. So there are two things to be noted, that if you are spiritually inclined and you are already doing some practice and moving toward, hold on. You don't have to only just take Kriya and then get there. Not necessary. But if you really feel that you need to take Kriya, then you'll have to find out how to go about it. Or come to Madanapalli, travel to India, or whatever. But after 2 years, I'm coming here for the first time. Not my fault, I didn't invent COVID-19. So there were restrictions, travel restrictions. I wouldn't have minded, really, honestly. But there were travel restrictions that we couldn't come. So I've come here after 2 years, probably. So hopefully the COVID has seen its last, although we have to be careful. I'm not saying we shouldn't. And therefore, maybe next year I'll come again, or even before that, I don't know. So those who are interested in Kriya can then register. But again, let me give you this message of hope. If you have not learned Kriya, it doesn't matter. If your attention is on spiritual understanding and finding the truth, you probably can also find it without this particular Kriya. There may be other. Kriya simply means a method. And when I say Kriya, I'm talking of a particular method which has come down to us from a certain tradition. So if you're looking only for that, then unfortunately you have to wait. So thank you very much. Namaskar. Yes.
So apparently there were some questions around staying connected with Blossom Foundation. So the easiest thing to do would be to go on blossomfoundation.com and sign up for email updates there. Or you can reach out to one of the volunteers standing information to get on our WhatsApp. If you subscribe to the mailing updates from the website, you will also be getting information as to when we finalize the next set of programs with Sir and when he's traveling. So some of the people were unable to reach out in time and register for the programs. You can avoid that situation. So blossomfoundation.com and subscribe for email updates. And if you're looking to support us, you'll find more information there for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you again. Namaskar. Wish you all the best.